Hi, back again. Right, so just two other sources of great information before I get into this history is Michael Tellinger and Sasha Stone. So Michael Tellinger is doing fabulous work in lynching the banks for all their fraud, as well as rebirthing the Ubuntu tribal system as a way of utilising efficient resources. And Sasha Stone is architecting paradigms for the future. So either of those two are definitely worth Googling as well and listening to their work. And most of all these people are linked in together. They're all talking to each other. So there's a lot going on. Okay, so I will just go through some of this history briefly. These are trusts and acts that we have all been put into by the Roman Curia without any of us having knowledge, without any permission being extracted from us. It's all been done through sleight of hand, which makes it all fraud, all slavery, and certainly all foreclosed, thanks to the UCC filings of last Christmas. So this year, 2013, there's been a lot of dialoguing going on and communicating with the power that would be the Australian government, and it's just being belligerent in recognising that it's been foreclosed. So 2014 will be much more full on in terms of taking action against those who think that this sort of stuff is a joke. When the people speak and declare that their rights will be sovereign, then there's no messing with that, and that is what has happened. That is where we are at on the planet. So we're going into our sovereign times now. Right, so as I showed you, the Australian government is a private corporation. So that's an incredibly audacious position to occupy, that it would be a corporation, that it's linked into the Vatican, and of course the other two main hubs for this system are London for the banking, Washington for the military, and Rome for the ecclesiastical side, the spiritual side. So that's the Australian government, registered on the Securities and Exchange Commission in the United States. And here we go. So the point I like to start at is 1302, when we were all put into a very infamous papal bull by the Vatican called Unum Sanctum. So let me just see. Okay, Unum Sanctum, being the first express trust claiming control over the whole planet and effectively deeming the Pope to be king of the world. So in this papal bull, it was declared that the Vatican owns all the bodies, all the souls, and all the land. Now that is an extraordinary claim to make. That would be like me getting up tomorrow morning and going, you know what, I own you. What do you think you're going to say to that? You're going to kick and scream and rant and rave and laugh your head off. Well, that's what happened back in 1302. And of course how this, and it goes back way further than that, but Unum Sanctum is a very decent place to start in terms of understanding this trust system that we have been in, which is all connected to basically black magic and priesthood and church and so forth, which is why I call this series the white coats and black robes. That will become more apparent as I go through this. And of course, back in the day, there was no internet to connect people, to empower people. They were just at the whim of this entity, the Vatican, that had lots of money, had lots of power. And if you dared to step out of line, you either had your head chopped off or you were burned at the stake as a witch, basically. The whole thing is just a complete and utter fraud and debacle. Anyway, let's move on from there. So that's 1302, Unum Sanctum. You're declared to be owned. Then in 1455, the next papal bull occurred, which was Romanus Pontifex, All land is claimed as Crown land. The first Sesta KV Trust created when a child is born, depriving them of all their beneficial entitlements and rights on the land at birth. Let's take that off for now. So there you go. Romanus Pontifex, you have no rights when you're born, from the time that you're born. In 1481, the papal bull Eterni Regis, meaning eternal crown. This is the second Sesta KV Trust, created when a child is born, being the sale of the birth certificate as a bond to the private central bank of the nation, depriving them of ownership of their flesh and condemning them to perpetual debt servitude as a Roman person or slave. So there you go, from the minute you're born just born into slavery. Now, Eterna Regis, meaning eternal crown. Well, there's no such concept on the planet. Nothing gets to rule eternally, because that is to say then that whoever it is ruling doesn't have a voice. Now, no constitution on the planet supports the people not having a voice. Every constitution is exactly about that, the people having a voice. So when the people stand up and say, no, thank you, we don't want this crown anymore, which is exactly what happened with the UCC filings, then that is what stands. The people have the most superior voice at all times. The meek shall inherit the earth, and inherit it we have. So move over, obsolete power that was. Right, now on to 1537, the papal bull Convocation, the third Sesta KV Trust, created when a child is baptised, which is to simply be born. It's not to say I've been baptised or I haven't been baptised. Everyone is baptised just by simply being born, being the grant of the baptismal certificate by the parents to the church or registrar, being the gift of title of the soul. Hence why the Bar Association is able to legally enforce maritime law against men and women, because they can be treated as things, as cargo that does not possess a soul. So how about that? That's just revolting. Now, under King Henry VIII of England and his Venetian Magyar advisors, the first poor laws were promulgated around 1535, coinciding with the first official mandate requiring uniform record keeping by all Church of England parishes of birth, deaths and marriages. The poor were considered the responsibility of the Church, including ensuring they had ample work and did not starve to death, as they were considered by default the property of the Church. There you go, the Church owns you. Under Queen Elizabeth I of England, a set of measures were introduced which had the effect of accelerating the disenfranchisement of land peasants into landless paupers. Under the Erection of Cottages Act 1588, peasants required local parish permission to erect dwellings, whereas before the erection of a dwelling by a land peasant on their lord's land was considered a right. As a result, the ranks of the landless poor or paupers swelled. Under Queen Elizabeth I of England, the laws concerning the administration of the care of the poor were refined through the Poor Laws of 1601, which introduced a basic set of rights for the poor, as well as the introduction of 2 overseers of the poor, the guardians in each parish, elected at Easter and funded through the first levy tax through local rates, now called council taxes, on property owning ratepayers. So first you're removed from the land and made into the poor, and then they set up all these laws to manage the poor that they created. It's ludicrous. Under Charles II of England, the concept of settlements as plantations of working poor controlled by the Church of England was further refined through the Settlement Act 1662 and Poor Relief Act 1662, including for the first time the issuance of settlement certificates equivalent to a birth certificate, passport and social security rolled into one document. A child's birthplace was its place of settlement unless its mother had a settlement certificate from some other parish stating that the unborn child was included on the certificate. However, from the age of 7 upwards, the child could have been apprenticed. Can you imagine getting an apprenticeship at the age of 7 and gained a settlement for itself called indentured service or voluntary service? So the child's already working by the age of 7. Under the reforms of the Settlement Act 1662 and Poor Relief Act 1662, no one was allowed to move from town to town without the appropriate settlement certificate. If a person entered a parish in which he or she did not have official settlement and seemed likely to become chargeable to the next parish, then an examination would be made by the justices or parish overseers. From this examination on oath, the justices would determine if that person had the means to sustain himself. The means to sustain himself by generating a living for himself. Goodness me. This is called human farming. The results of the examination were documented in an examination paper. As a result of the examination, the intruder would either be allowed to stay or would be removed by means of what was known as a removal order, the origin of the modern equivalent of an eviction and removal notice when a sheriff removes people from their home. According to the various settlement acts of the 17th century onwards until the introduction of birth certificates, the issue of a settlement certificate was considered a privilege, not a right. If a peasant wanted to move, the home parish could choose to issue a settlement certificate, which then effectively became an indemnity insurance to the new parish if the pauper was unable to earn a living. A settlement certificate was only valid if it bore the seals of the overseers of both parishes and that of the local justices and was not transferable. This is the same model of modern passport for citizens listed as P, paupers, used today. Check your passport under type and see if you've got a P there, which I'm sure you would have, which means you're a pauper peasant owned by the church, and that's your settlement papers. Shocking stuff. This is human farming. Okay, I'm going to pause there and start again so that my file is not too big. Thank you. I will be back.